Three. There we go. Hello, everyone. Welcome to RSP podcast with me, Rajjan Parmar. I'm here with Niko. Right, am I saying this right? Vorobyov. Vorobyov.
Vorobyov.
Vorobyov, who is the author of the book Dopeworld: Adventures in Drugland. And I've just been coming across.
My surname was a nightmare at school.
Sorry.
My surname was a nightmare at school.
Yeah, I can imagine. But yeah, no, thank you for coming on. So your book, Dope World: Adventures in Druglands, just it sounds so interesting, and I mean, you've just got a crazy story as well. So I mean, can you give us a background where you come from?
Yeah, sure. So as your listeners might have picked up, my accent is a little bit kind of all over the place. I remember I was doing one video, and I remember one of the comments was, "I can't place this guy. He keeps switching between Hackney and Hollywood." So basically, I was born in Russia. It was the Soviet Union back then, but Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg, and but we moved to Italy first, I think, and then America. So I learned English in America by watching cartoons. And then, but we came here when I was about seven, or I think about seven. So that's why, yeah, like obviously once you learn to speak a language a certain way, it kind of sticks with you. So that's why my accent's a little bit all over the place. So we moved to a small city. I suppose we're a city because we have a cathedral called Bath. Which at that time, it's changed a bit now, but at that time there weren't too many foreigners there. I think there was pretty much me, this Iranian kid, and this one Christian Pakistani guy, and that was it. That was the United Nations of our school. So yeah, I kind of also wore glasses, and so I kind of got bullied a lot. Well, not a lot, but enough, let's say. And I had a lot of self-esteem issues growing up, so I kind of thought that turning to kind of drugs and crime, that would kind of make me more popular, make me get invited to parties in a way. And it kind of did, because then by the time I finished university, there pretty much wasn't a party around campus I wasn't invited to. I mean, oh, they also probably absolutely just wanted me for my drugs as well. But, I wasn't standing around psychoanalyzing everyone's motives. I was just there having a good time. And, yeah, unfortunately, my sort of risk-reward mechanism in my head, it wasn't very screwed on. And I was very reckless. I think I managed to get away with it for a while. I think because I was pretty much a white middle-class uni student. I remember at one point I got arrested. It was obvious I was dealing. My wallet was full of crumpled up bills. This was at a rave in West London. Actually, I was chased by the police for a couple of minutes, and as I was running, I still had about half an ounce of ganja left in my pocket. So I was just kind of tossing it out my pocket as I was running along. But I left one small baggie of coke to give them an excuse, when they catch me, to give them an excuse while I was running. So they caught me. My wallet was full of crumpled up bills, so it was obvious that I was dealing. But I was only cautioned, so I was only given a warning for the small baggie of coke, and then I got let go. And then I read afterwards that only about 44% of white suspects in London were charged with possession of coke, compared to about 75, I think, percent of black suspects, which is pretty crazy.
Yeah, that's crazy. But oh wow. So how did it start off? What did you start selling, and how did it sort of grow? Because you grew to having a couple of runners and stuff as well, didn't you?
Yeah, that was sort of more towards the end of my career, where I was just buying and selling so much. Mostly it was weed. So my main business was weed. I did a bit of coke and MDMA, Mandy as well, but that was more like a hobby, I guess. It wasn't on a big scale anymore. So it's mostly weed. I just was buying and selling so much weed, it was just impossible for me to just kind of take all the orders by myself. Even if I was selling it in ounces to some people who were also selling it themselves, it was just getting too much. So I had to split it up. I got a couple of my friends and a couple more my more kind of like more loyal customers. And yeah, I had a whole little operation going. But my downfall was, as usual, just one stupid mistake. So the us criminals, we have to get lucky all the time, pretty much. We have to make the right choice all the time. The police only have to be lucky once to catch us and have the right amount of evidence. So what's frustrating is I always tell my customers, like, don't take anything on the tube. There are dogs on the tube. So there's the police like to stand around usually at the top of escalators with sniffer dogs. So it's an easy way for them to make a couple of arrests without really doing much work. But that day I was in a rush, so I just put a couple of wraps, not too many, just a couple in my back pocket. Thought, hell with this. Off I went, and then as luck as I've had it.
What? A couple of wraps of what? Of weed or of Mandy?
It was MDMA. I got told later. I was on Sean Atwood's podcast. I got told later this is probably true that dogs can't actually smell MDMA that well. But I guess I was also handling weed earlier that day, so maybe there was residual smell, or maybe there were some other chemicals mixed in the MDMA as well. I'm not, or maybe the police just thought I was suspicious, and they just got their dogs to sit down.
Just a random check. I think with the dog thing, I think it's only certain types of dog, right, can smell MDMA.
Yeah, apparently. I haven't really looked into it, but yeah.
Yeah, or I guess, or you could be right. It could just be the weed residue or whatever. I don't know. And then you got caught. And then what was your sentence? How long did you spend in prison?
So I was out on bail for a month or two, but then I eventually got sent down for 2.5 years. And luckily, I only ended up serving about a year of that. It should have been like a year and a bit, but I was a good boy and didn't start any fights, so I got off like a little bit early. But I had to be on tag, so I had to be home from 7 till 7.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Well, I mean, what were your family sort of stance on this? I mean, did they know that you were dealing before, or like was it just come as a shock to them?
Oh, my family had no idea, and they had no idea until after I was already in prison. Because, see, I thought there might be a chance, however small, but there might be a chance I might get away with it somehow, end up with community service or something, and they'll never hear about it. I'll just not tell them. Because, like, you read sometimes in newspaper, like, sometimes a judge gives, like, a stupid sentence, like, I remember there was like some girl stabbed her boyfriend or something, and he just suspended her sentence for ABH or GBH or something just because he said she was promising. She was a promising medical student or something like that.
Oh, I think I remember this case. Yeah. She stabbed her boyfriend and got away. That's a I mean, that's a big thing to hang on as well, to not tell your parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I shouldn't have like hinged my bets on that. But like also because I wasn't expecting this at all, so I wasn't really thinking straight. I couldn't really think about the situation rationally, if that makes sense. But eventually they found out when I was already inside, so I'd kind of disappeared off their radar for a few days, and they eventually got to my housemate who told them.
Oh God.
Yeah. Then I got a letter from them, and when I was already in prison, that's how I knew they knew.
God, were they? I mean, I guess they were still angry, but I mean, did they still keep in contact? They visit you regularly at the prison and stuff.
Yeah. I was lucky in that I have a very kind of loving and supportive and stable family, which is why I guess I haven't kind of just gone back to doing drugs now. I think that was the main thing. And a lot of people in prison, they didn't have that. They come from like broken homes or have no homes at all, or like they do have a family, but their family doesn't care about them. So they don't have like a stable network to go back to when they come out. So that's the reason why there's a lot of reoffending in this country.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I guess as well. I mean, yeah, you like say. I guess you are. You say you are very very lucky because you're. I mean, you're an educated man as well. Like you say, you were at university. You're doing your. Sorry.
Thanks.
No, no. Well, it's true though. You said that you were at university, and I think I was looking at an interview and saying that you finished your. Am I right? You finished your master's exams after you got out of prison.
Yeah. So I did my bachelor's in history, and then I
I did
studied.
history as well.
Oh yeah. What?
Yeah.
Which uni?
I went to Ruskin in Cambridge, but I'm currently doing my master's at the University of Sussex. But my specialty was actually Russian history, 1930s Soviet history.
Oh, the Stalin times.
Yeah, the Stalin era. Yeah, I was very depressed after writing a 10,000 word dissertation on that.
Um. So then I did my master's at UCL, which was in something called countering terrorism and organized crime or something like that. But I just say when people ask you, I just say criminology because it's impossible
Nice.
to
Yeah.
explain all that. It has criminology in it, so I'm not lying. But the thing is, with a course like that, a lot of them are either cops or they want to be cops, and a lot of your teachers are also and professors are also ex-cops. So that made writing the letter. I wrote them a letter very awkward. Uh, It was something like, yeah, I'm not gonna make those exams this year. Uh, but they granted me a deferment. Um, so that basically meant that as long as I got my tag, if I got out early, that means I'd be in time to finish my exams. I didn't know what would happen if I hadn't got out early,
Hmm.
but I didn't want to find out either.
Yeah, yeah, true. But I mean, I'm guessing you must have also been thinking that, I mean, it's going to be crazy hard for me to get a job in this field if I've got a conviction for drug dealing, right?
Yeah, I wasn't really looking for a job in that like law enforcement. I wouldn't did want to work in like like risk analysis for like
Yeah.
insurance companies or something like that. That's what I was looking into.
Oh, okay.
Um, I think like coming out, I wasn't really like I did find it hard to get a job, but I don't think it was so much because of the record, because I only got asked that a couple of times. I think it really depends what kind of job you're looking for.
Hmm.
I think it's mainly because I had basically zero experience because I wasn't really thinking about the future.
Yeah.
I didn't really do like much in terms of like internships, or I hadn't any real experience in an office environment.
I guess it's because you had that constant stream of money coming in from drug
Yeah,
dealing. I guess.
exactly.
So when you're a student, and I mean, I guess you got to live I mean, the best student life, isn't it? You're at parties every week, didn't have to worry about money. Like,
Yeah,
so that's
yeah.
pretty much what people go to university for. But I mean, how were your experiences in prison? How did you find it? What's the prison system like in this country?
Oh, well, the main thing I'll say is when if you watch a lot of prison movies, I think in the UK, the most realistic UK prison movie is probably Startup.
Mhm.
But then if you watch it, like they do the same thing as with American movies. They throw in a lot of like gang fights, like people being stabbed up in the showers and all that. I'm not saying that doesn't happen. Like I've seen it happen, and especially in my prison, which was HMP ISIS, it was a young offenders prison. It happened pretty much every day.
Really?
But it doesn't happen to most of us most of the time. Most of the time, it's just if they made a realistic prison movie, no one would watch it because it'll be two dudes in a room. One's like reading a book or watching Jeremy Kyle or whatever. The other one's just doing press ups. Like halfway through, like they get opened up for lunch and they go back in again, and they just swap places.
And then that's it. Is that
Yeah,
it?
it's just
Yeah.
really boring and depressing. And I think in my experience, the main issue with prison is it's just such a massive like mind fuck that, for example, say you or me, we get like a bit depressed or like worried about something or whatever on the outside, yeah.
Yeah.
Then we can just kind of I know go outside, call our mates, like uh, browse the internet or whatever, post your dark thoughts to Reddit. I don't know what you do.
Distraction.
Yeah. In prison, you're just locked in a room. That's it. You're not coming out. You have a TV, I guess, but that only goes so far. It's not really interaction. It's one way, just watching stuff that's happening.
Yeah.
It just kind of any kind of bad thoughts that build up inside you just keep going round and round and round. And what I found out afterwards when I got out is the time I was inside, I don't remember what the exact percentage was. Maybe you can look it up afterwards. 2013 to 2014, but like the suicide rate in prison went up like crazy, and that's because that year there are a lot of cutbacks, all the austerity stuff. So they actually, in the case of my prison, actually didn't have enough staff to run the prison properly. They didn't have enough guards to watch everyone. So what happened was they'd shut down like half the prison for a day. They'd let the other half like go out, go to lessons or work or whatever, have the right amount of exercise. The other half would just kind of sit in their cells. So we'd be sat in our cells for like up to 23 and a half hours a day. Keep in mind that a lot of prisoners have mental issues to begin with. So this environment isn't really helping. So it's not really surprising that, like first of all, the suicide rate went up. Then couple of years later, I think it was 2016, there was like 5 or 6 different riots kicking off, and it was precisely because of that, because everyone was just bored out of their minds in their cell. Some of them were smoking spice as well, which also isn't good for your mental health, and it was just chaos, man.
Yeah, man, it sounds crazy. I mean, I know. I mean, even though people like yourself end up in those institutions for, drug use or whatever. I mean, it's pretty obvious that drug use does still go on in the prisons, right? Did you see a lot of that?
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't smoke the spice, but I remember a couple of times me and my cellmate we paid extra for like the actual weed. But then I'd always get really paranoid, because I knew they did those little piss tests where you pee in a test tube and they analyze it for stuff. That's actually one of the reasons why spice is so popular, because spice doesn't come up on those tests, funnily enough. Weed and opiates, but not spice. So I got really paranoid. So every night for like the next 3 weeks, every time we smoked weed, I just chugged down about 2 liters of water or whatever to just dilute my pee. If in the morning they woke me up and tried to get me to pee in something, they wouldn't find anything.
But I mean, the thing with actual how much is it for the how much did you have to pay to get weed into the prison?
Oh, I don't remember the exact price, but I remember it was like way more. I think like 5 times more expensive than on the outside. So like before I could it would be a tenner's worth of weed outside, it would be like 50 quid. I mean, don't quote me on that, because that was a few years ago and might have changed, and I also don't remember, but I think it was something like that.
No, I can believe that, to be honest. I can completely believe that. It must be. And I suppose the crazy thing about it is that how did you not get caught? Because the thing with weed is that unlike coke, MDMA, or whatever, they don't stink out like the whole place when you're smoking it.
First of all, just on our side, we would light up a bunch of incense candles to cover up the smell, or we'd smoke by the toilet, because usually by the toilet there was air ducts. We just blow in the air duct.
Okay.
Or I don't remember if this was just an urban legend, but a couple of guys I saw smoking around the showers with the water turned on, because they thought the water would absorb it somehow. I don't know if that actually works. That's just something they believed.
Maybe, but like I imagine it would be like in a small bathroom, something like that with one window. Like I can't imagine it would work in a massive room full of showers. But fair enough. I suppose I admire the creativity.
For sure, like when you have someone who's like dealing on the wing, someone who's selling weed on the wing, as opposed to someone who's like girlfriend brought it in and just for them and their cellmate. When you have someone who's like actually like selling it to the others, then the guards are in on it.
Really, is that, would you say, how they get it into the prison, that the guards are in on it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like to do it consistently, yeah. Like to do it like one off, like yeah, you can like your girlfriend can hide it in her mouth or whatever. You can go for a kiss in the visitor's room, pass it through that way. But any big amount, I think, goes through the guards.
Yeah, I think it's got to. I suppose I think it's got to. It can't with that sort of
Or
control.
like like the teachers or like any outside staff, basically.
Yeah, I suppose. And what they just, I guess, a gang member approaches them on the outside, gives it to them. Wow.
Yeah, because like a lot of prison guards live in the same neighborhoods as prisoners, and most of them, they're not exactly minted either. So like a lot of them would like know like the sort of people who they'd be locking up on the outside as well. And actually, that's the case. I don't want to mention the city, but one of my friends outside London, he has a lot of prison guard buddies, and he's not what you'd call a legitimate businessman.
Really? So he's got, I suppose, it must have screws on the payroll then. I mean, it doesn't surprise me. And I suppose it kind of leads in well to, I suppose, going into your book as well. Like that, I mean, all of this trafficking all across the world. I mean, in Mexico, even to the UK, it's got to have the government involved in some capacity.
Yeah, there's a lot of I don't know, like with the UK, I think it's not so much the smuggling itself as they turn a blind eye to the money and stuff, but in other countries, for sure, like Mexico, yeah, most of the Latin American countries, places like Burma and Pakistan, definitely Afghanistan, kind of not so much Russia, but like a lot of the kind of ex-Soviet countries that are near Russia, like Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, it's definitely like that. And one thing that was interesting, and it's not just me who found it. Like the BBC did a report on this as well. So in the Philippines, I have this president now called Rodrigo Duterte, who's basically declared. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a nuts. He's basically like a cartoon villain, but in real life.
Oh, it's so, like, I mean, some of the stuff. I mean, have you, some of the interviews and stuff. There was one, something he was talking about, that he was like saying, to all the funeral homes, you're all going to get loads of money because I'm going to be sending you all the drug dealers and the drug users. And he was saying this on public television, that
Yeah,
kill them. But sorry, go on, continue.
yeah. I think one other thing he said is like any cop who gets like who kills a suspect in a drug operation, like um, he'll personally, what's it called when the like pardon them, I guess. Get the
Yeah. I suppose
yeah,
pardon is the word. Yeah, excuse them, I suppose. Yeah.
yeah. That actually didn't end up fully happening because I know that so I think something like 27,000 people, like Filipinos, have been killed in either anti-drug operations or like so-called vigilante killings in the past 4 years. But 3 officers have been convicted. Three
Three,
officers.
three.
So
Wow.
I guess they must be pretty pissed off right now.
Yeah, yeah, the unlucky three, right? But I mean, from what I've looked into in the Philippines, it's I guess you obviously would have more authority, but a lot of them are they're like sort of hitmen or vigilantes or something.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna get onto. So I met through like a local journalist. When it comes to like countries like Russia or like English speaking countries, I can pretty much do things by myself.
Yeah.
But countries like Philippines or Mexico, I had to get someone who knew the territory to show me around. So I had this local journalist who brought me in to meet one of the members of the death squads, and it was pretty trippy because we went to the outskirts of Manila, to this kind of karaoke bar, and he was staying in a room over the karaoke bar. And I remember the door opened. We just walked in. He was already standing just in the middle of the room, like balaclava on, like
Jeez.
fully dressed in black. He had a little backpack with a bullet hanging off the zipper. I also remember at one point in the interview, he opened up the backpack, started waving this like pistol around. I mean, I'm not a gun expert, but it sort of looked like one of those like Colt 45 type guns.
Yeah.
Like, I know it probably wasn't actually a Colt 45, but it looked like from what I know from Call of Duty, it
Yeah,
looked like
that's
a Colt
exactly what
45.
I had in my mind. The Colt from Call of Duty World at War. That's exactly what I had in my mind.
Yeah, he started just like waving it around, and like I just a couple of times like the barrel passed by my face. I was just like, I hope no one told him about my old job.
Yeah.
Um, so one thing he said, and this has been, it's not just me. This has been confirmed with like reports in the BBC and stuff. He said that who actually worked for was military, so some kind of like colonel or general or something, and he left a lot of like big shot kind of drug barons alone, as long as they remember to pay their tax. So I think at least part of like the war on drugs in the Philippines, it's not so much that they actually want to fight the drug problem, which is I think almost impossible anyway, as some parts of the government want to kind of nationalize the drug business, if that makes sense. They want to get rid of that private competition.
Yeah, I suppose that's one way. I suppose I mean, you are right because I also, I mean, it's very hard to see an end to the war on drugs. So I guess that they're just monopolizing on it, right? Just finding another solution. I mean, well, if I mean, it's not a solution at all. I mean, I mean, that's a bad way to put it, but they're fine. They've
They're
got them.
making do with what they've got.
Yeah, exactly. But what are the main drugs problems in the Philippines? Is it crystal meth, right?
Yeah, so all the two most popular ones are weed, because that's like popular everywhere, and crystal meth, which they call shabu.
Yeah.
But this didn't make it into my book because this only happened like a few months ago. But a few months ago, there's like so Duterte, the president, there was one of the like the few politicians left who was like criticizing him. She was like basically said, "Oh yeah, you're full of shit," and he was like, "Yeah, go on, prove it." So he kind of like challenged her, and he appointed her to like oversee the drug policy in the Philippines. And she produced a report which you can't find anymore. It's been deleted off the government's website.
Hmm.
But according to the Filipino police's own statistics, they only actually managed to intercept about what they estimate is like 1% of like the shabu, the crystal meth, and 1% of the cash that was actually going around.
Wow. So the market's still pretty much very much active then, right?
Yeah. One thing it has done, like I don't want to like say give credit where credit's due, but this is like a noticeable effect. Is the level of street crimes gone down somewhat. Like
Mhm.
there's less kind of muggings and things like that. Um, but on the other hand, the murder rate is now sky high.
Yeah, yeah,
So, it's like how many people do you need to shoot to save your iPhone sort of question.
Mhm. And these aren't just drug dealers as well, right? They're the drug users as well.
Yeah, and
Crazy.
so it's one of the kind of the aspects of the operation is called knock and plead, which is when police go to the house of a suspected drug dealer or drug user, knock on their door, and like kind of ask them nicely to change their ways. Um, and what happens after that is a lot of them just get it's basically like a system of verifying if they're actually at home or not, and this is their address. So what
Mm.
happens later is they get a little knock from a couple of boys in masks, like the ones I met earlier, and they're not going to be getting high for a long time afterwards.
Yeah, Jesus. Oh, so scary. Like, yeah, like you said, I mean, you literally put it's what they are. They're death squads just
But
coming
it,
around.
it gets worse even. So like a couple of times, obviously like some of them did get the message, and some of them like legitimately like you can go through the records, like they voluntarily like admitted themselves to rehab or whatever afterwards, and they checked out, and then they still get killed a few months later because they're still on the list.
Yeah. Oh God.
And then it gets even worse than that. So there's no like real official system because it's all this death squad stuff happens in the shadows. No one's actually checking how these lists get made, how they get updated. So for all you know, like your neighbor just doesn't like you, calls up the cops saying, "Yeah, there's this guy selling meth on my street." And
And then that's it. You're on the
yeah,
list.
you get a knock, and then time to wrap up your affairs.
Jesus, that's like yeah, that is literally like Stalin Russia, right? Like you report your enemy to the KGB and then they take care of it for you.
Yeah,
Oh
something
my
like
God.
that.
God damn, that's oh man, that's absolutely crazy. I mean, I mean, were you there when any of these murders or anything went off? Did you hear about it? Were you around at the scenes or
Well, funnily enough, one time I didn't actually see it happen like the actual murder itself. But I remember once we were eating me and my journalist buddy were eating at a restaurant, and he's just like constantly checking Twitter and Instagram, social media for any news, and then he was suddenly just like, just as we were like kind of got to dessert, he was just like, yeah, a guy's been shot dead across the street. So we ran out. We ran out the restaurant. We left like one of his buddies there, so like just so that we can. They knew we're coming back and we'll pay for our food, obviously. Then we just ran down the street. You could see sirens. We ran towards the sirens, and they'd already carried the body away. But there was like a big pool of red, and it wasn't just like red liquid. It was like chunky red. So there's bits of brain in there as well.
jeez.
Um, we don't know if this was specifically a drug related killing, but it was like the same MO, so the same kind of type of operation that all these death squads use. When they're not knocking on someone's houses, what they do is two of them ride up to you on a motorbike, shoot you in the head, and ride off. So it's the same type of killing. So even if it wasn't drug related necessarily, it could still be like the same guys who are doing it.
Hmm.
Like they're just like freelancing, doing other jobs on the side.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Well, are they? Yeah. Well, I suppose are these people? Are they hired as are they freelance hitmen or are they actually like government government trained people? If that makes sense.
I think it's like it's a mix.
Yeah.
So some of them are yeah, some of them are like government trained. Some of them are just kind of gangsters.
Yeah.
Such. And some of them are off-duty police. I think there's been you can even find an article online like one police chief is complaining that too many of his men have suspicious alibis for time murders were committed.
Really. But then I suppose, but I mean, I mean, will they be able to fire them on that? Because it was like saying that, only three of those police officers have been
That
convicted
was
of.
only after mass protests as well. I think that was only after like 70,000 people led by the Catholic Church had to march through Manila for even that to happen. For even
Yeah.
those three, and they had to be like CCTV of it. Like there was no way they could get out of this.
Yeah. Wow, that's like kind of the opposite, like in the same strategies, but the opposite of like, I mean, where another place you traveled was Mexico, right? It's kind of like, the law is above the law in killing drug dealers, when in kind of the drug dealers are above the law in Mexico killing lawmen.
Kinda. I think Mexico is an interesting situation where I think the drug cartels, like since the 80s, really have got so powerful that they're actually more or less in the government.
Yeah,
Actually, we have a similar situation in Russia. So a lot of like the sort of mafia bosses in Russia are also in the government, but because like Putin keeps a tight ship on everything, it's just corruption. It's not like car bombs going off and like
Yeah.
like 5 severed heads being left next to like a message next to them, or in broad daylight or whatever. So in Russia, it's more
Yeah.
like corruption. But one interesting thing you can see with Mexico is Mexico only became democracy, proper democracy around 1999, 2000, I think. And around that time, and all the like major drug wars in Mexico started about 3 or 4 years after that.
Yeah.
So before that, like they were quite, it was like Russia. They had comfortably had a deal with whoever was in power, and there are only a few cartels. So what you see now is there's like a bunch of different political parties. They're all in bed with different cartels. Like the federal police are working for like El Chapo, like the local police in some other city they're working for his rivals like Los Zetas or Jalisco or someone like that. So it's as much a war between kind of different branches of the government as it is between like criminal gangster outlaw types themselves.
I see. Well, I mean, yeah, it's so complex in Mexico. And I think I was watching an interview. I think it was on. I can't remember what it was on. It was like it's a documentary about some guy who was in the SAS or something like that, and he
Yeah,
used yeah, the real Narcos or something
yeah,
like that. And I think it was in Mexico, and he said he interviewed a hitman, and the hitman said only politicians order hits on other politicians.
yeah, that sounds about right.
Yeah.
One thing about that documentary is the guy who was showing him around Sinaloa.
Hmm.
They go to Sinaloa, and I think not Cancun. Where do they go? Like another resort town.
Culican, was it?
Acapulco, yeah.
Yeah.
Not Acapulco, but Culiacan, yeah. So his guy in Culiacan is the same guy as my guy.
Oh, really? Oh, that's
So
really cool.
if you see like if you watch it back, there's like this sort of Mexican Steven Spielberg looking guy in the background of some scenes. Yeah, that's Miguel. That's my buddy.
Oh, nice. I mean, and this is the guy who took you to the house of El Chapo, right? Is this
Yeah.
and you ended up spending the night in his family house. So can you tell us that story?
Um. Well, it's a long story, but I'll try to shorten it down. So first of all, it was this is El Chapo was born in this village called La Tuna, which is way out in the mountains. And there's like very, very little kind of in terms of road infrastructure there. So we needed a 4x4 to get there. But unfortunately, we checked around all like the big car rental places in Culiacan. We couldn't find a single 4x4 for that weekend. And I remembered we'd early interviewed this guy who was like a heroin cook. So they give like the gum from the opium poppies to him, and he kind of cooks into heroin with acid and stuff like that. And we remembered he was selling his pickup truck. So we went over to him, borrowed his pickup truck, and we're driving around the mountains for 4 hours in the smack dealer's pickup truck. And we got to the village of La Tuna, where my guy Miguel, he sees someone he knows. He's like, "Hey, can you take us to Don Angel's house?" And the guy was like, "Yeah, sure, come on, guys." And we just got there, and it's sort of like the stereotypical like drug baron's manor from like an 80s action movie. So it's like a big white hacienda with like henchmen standing all around, except instead of like Miami Vice suits, they're all wearing like army camos and like bandoliers and stuff, machine guns. And we walked in, and this guy is just kind of having dinner, and he looks up at us. I'm like, "Who the hell are you guys?" I'm like, "Hey, we're looking for Don Angel." And he's like, "Yes, I'm Don Angel. What you want?" And it turns out that was the wrong Don Angel. That was El Chapo's brother, whereas we were looking for his cousin who had the same name, Don Angel. So we kind of like awkwardly shuffled out of there.
I mean, what was his reaction? Was he just like, I mean, like, was he just like, who are you guys? Like,
Yeah, I mean, I guess like on some level, they must have known. Like he must have told like all the village
yeah,
security whatever that we were coming. Otherwise, we wouldn't have even made it that far.
yeah, exactly.
But
Yeah,
like, he probably wasn't expecting us to come to his house. Is
yeah.
what I'm
What's he
getting at.
like?
Um, I don't really see much of him. He looked quite rich, and he had a big family. That's all I can really say. So we got to his cousin's house. His cousin's like this sort of old Mexican kind of cowboy guy, and he's got the big sombrero hat, the kind of snakeskin boots, all that jazz. Hung around his for a bit, drove him over to a nearby village where he hung out with one of his mates, and drove back. And I don't know, maybe this was like just for me, just to kind of mess with me a little bit, or whatever. But one of the businesses he has done get, he has a little sushi stand. And by the time we got back to his house and it was already dark, I could only really describe it as like a Mexican cartel sushi party. So there were like, I don't know, about maybe a dozen or like 20 guys, like big Mexican guys, stood around with like assault rifles around their shoulders, and, like pistols sticking out of their jeans, just standing around eating sushi and like listening to this mariachi folk music in the background. So that was one of the weirdest nights of my life. And then one of them comes up to me, another one of El Chapo's cousins. He was like, "What do you think about Albanians?" I thought that was a very strange question, very random. It turns out he's a big fan of Taken with Liam Neeson. You know, where his daughter gets kidnapped by the Albanian mafia?
Yeah.
He's just a big movie fan. And we were just sitting around just talking about action movies and stuff. Like, while eating sushi in the Mexican mountains at night, surrounded by like armed drug dealer bodyguards.
That's crazy. Wow, that sounds, I mean, yeah, that's unbelievable. I mean, did you ask them about Chapo? Like, I mean, did you ask them any stories, anything like, could you tell anything about like any personal information about him?
Yeah, like he's a big practical joker apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, one time when he was still like a poor peasant farmer, they said that a girl in the village had died. Maybe it was a nearby village, I don't remember. But they didn't have enough money to pay for her grave. So he got these two other boys to go to some other, like a third village, and steal a tombstone from the graveyard.
Mm.
Like they didn't want to do it, but they're like, "Oh yeah, okay." So like this guy breaks into the cemetery at night. He's like digging around this. He finds a tombstone of a girl with like the same name. He starts digging around. He's like very superstitious. So he's like, I'm sorry. Like I'm gonna come back and put it back later, like talking to the dead girl. And then like he suddenly hears like, ooh, and he sees like this figure walking towards him with like arms outstretched, like this giant bed sheet with little eye holes. Like, ooh, just freaks the hell out. Apparently, yeah, that was all a prank by El Chapo.
Chapo set all that up just to scare this poor boy when he's robbing a gravestone. Crazy. It's crazy. Like it must be really like mad, like when you're sitting there and you're talking to these people and like that their relative is like known all round as this violent, crazy person with, responsible for the deaths of so many people. And then they're telling you jokes about how he used to dress up as a ghost and scare people. Like it must be so weird.
Yeah, I mean, they're just he's just another guy at the end of the day. Yeah, that's all I can really say about that. I like to, because there's so many kind of myths about the everyone else has already covered that angle. Like he was, and he is, yeah, he has ordered literally tens of thousands of murders, or thousands at least.
Yeah.
But that's not everything's like black and white. Like also, a lot of the people in that era, they kind of look up to him, because like he really did like build like roads to the village. He like set up electricity for them there. I guess it's kind of similar to maybe like Bin Laden or the Taliban in like Pakistan, Afghanistan, when they fought off for the Russian invasion. So they're kind of like, to us, obviously they're still villains, but to a certain like part of the population, they're heroes as well.
Well, I suppose, like, Mexico has extreme poverty, and the government don't do people a lot of favors. But you do hear stories of these drug lords like El Chapo giving, like you say, building roads, building schools, and giving money to the people when the government don't. So, I mean, and especially if you come from one of those areas, and this person comes and looks after you, I'm sure you probably do look past those sorts of crimes. But I'm guessing, I know it may sound kind of silly, but do you think his family really know the full extent of what he's done, what he does, or what he's done, I suppose now?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like some of them are involved as well,
Yeah.
but like they don't really like I didn't try not to push them too much on the murder angle of it. But in terms of drugs, like they figure that the gringos, like even if like Trump managed to like build the wall and shut down the border completely, like he's always promising to do, but never will. Even if he actually succeeded in that, then all that would happen is the gringos, the Americans, just come to Mexico and they come get the stuff themselves. You know,
Yeah.
like you're not. It's not going to change that there's a demand for this product. So unless you deal with that demand somehow, either get everyone to stop taking drugs somehow, or yeah,
Yeah.
there's no. It's going to be very hard, basically.
If they don't do it, someone else will, right?
Yeah, and
Exactly. Yeah.
historically, that's what happened as well. So like, the only reason like the Mexican cartel is so powerful now is because after Pablo Escobar, there was so much attention on the Colombian cartels that there's just so much heat on them from the DEA and stuff that they couldn't function properly. So they delegated a lot of the tasks to the Mexicans. So the problem spread to Mexico rather than just stopping with Colombia.
Yeah. And I suppose, and like I guess, like Mexico, I mean, it's right on the doorstep of the biggest drug market in the world, the United States. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, those border cities of Juarez, Tijuana, they're worth billions. Like, they get so much money goes through there. But I mean, one thing I always just find interesting about why Trump wanted to build a wall is that, like, I mean, Chapo's famous for digging tunnels under the ground. I don't understand why he thought the wall would be the best idea.
I mean, you could make one argument that yeah, that's one thing. So I've read a report from, I remember if it was the American DEA or like the Justice Department, or it was some like American agency. So actually, like the smallest the tunnels aren't actually that important to the structure. What's the biggest way of getting like a bulk shipment in, not just like a couple of kilos hidden up someone's pants or whatever?
Mm.
It's through legit cargo. So like you'd have like a shipment of tequila or something, or like bread, even something basic like that coming in, and just hide it in there. Because
Mm.
there's just so much going, like literally like tens of thousands of border crossings each day. They're not
Yeah.
going to check every one. And if it looks like legit cargo, it probably is.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
10 times out of 10, it's going to be something legit. So I'm not even going to bother stopping them. They're going to stop like the guys who are obviously suspicious, like someone with prison tattoos on their neck.
Yeah.
So that really, even if he built the wall, it's not going to do anything at all to stop it.
I suppose probably the ones that they catch are probably like decoys anyway, like
Yeah,
just giving them numbers just so that it looks like they're doing something. But I guess, for example, if you're hiding your drugs in the tires of a lorry, for example, like that it's going to be hard. They're not going to cut into the tires of the lorry and take it all out.
yeah, unless like they like that their informant or someone specifically told them that was going to happen.
Exactly. But
Yeah. The one thing you could argue kind of might work about Trump's wall if he did it is because a lot of immigrants, especially from like south of Mexico, like Guatemala and Honduras and stuff, try to wander through the desert into America, and a lot of them die from just dehydration, getting lost. So I guess that would stop some of that happening. But then they still want to get there. So then all they're gonna do is they're just gonna take boats and sail around, and they're just gonna drown in the sea. You're gonna have like the Mediterranean crisis in Europe with all the immigrants
yeah,
from like Syria and Africa and stuff. So it'll be
because
just like that.
So yeah, because there was that caravan of immigrants that stopped at Tijuana, right, a couple of years back, and there was a massive caravan of immigrants at Tijuana who'd come through South America, and then then got stopped at the border, and apparently they were causing some havoc.
Oh yeah, I heard about that. I don't know what happened to them in the end.
I don't either. Yeah, no, I don't.
I know they had some trouble in Mexico as well, like getting into fights with the locals and stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure what the whole story is there. I also heard that like some of them. One thing I saw this thing on Joe Rogan by the way. Some guy was talking about it. Like this ex-Mexican cop, and he said that they chose that. Sorry.
Ed Calderon. Was it Ed Calderon?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a good. That's one of the best Joe Rogan podcasts. Actually, his ones are really good.
Yeah, he said they took that route specifically to Tijuana to avoid territory of this drug gang called Los Zetas. Because a lot of them were also gang members themselves or whatever, and they didn't want that conflict. I don't know about how many of them were gang members. Probably some were. But one thing you should remember, especially with Los Zetas, is they have a very nasty history of. I'd say there's a town near the Texas border called San Fernando, I think, and there were not one but two mass killings of refugees and immigrants there. I think because they refused to work for us Los Zetas, or they didn't pay Los Zetas like protection money for going through. But it was really something like it's almost like you can't imagine how horrible it is. Like the first massacre was like 70 people, I think, but the next massacre was something like 250. It was like war zone, war crime level shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of the really horrific stories I hear coming out of Mexico of cartel violence come from the Zetas, and it always has for many years. I've always heard the Zetas, and now the new generation cartel are looking pretty
Like the new
scary.
Zetas.
Sorry, they are the new Zetas, right? So, but so like the Zetas split, right, and then now came and different groups of them have formed the new generation cartel. Is that right?
You're on the right track, but not quite. But you're on the right track. So New Generation was originally like a hit squad for the Sinaloa cartel, so El Chapo's boys, to fight Los Zetas, and then Los Zetas, just because they caused so much mayhem, or maybe because more likely because they were causing so much mayhem because they didn't have the same power that El Chapo's had in terms of like corruption. So they solved their problems through violence, which also attracted more attention on them. And they still exist, but they're a lot weaker than they were in those days. But now the new generation, they did sort of the same thing Los Zetas did, because Los Zetas used to be a hit squad for another cartel, and then they broke off. So the new generation did the same thing Los Zetas did, and they broke off from the Sinaloa, and they became like the new bad boys on the blocks, as it were.
The terrifying boys on the block. I saw this video the other day on Twitter, and it was like it looks like the army. It literally looks like the army. They have, I think if I send you the video, I'll show it to you. They are in full army camo. They like a gray and white army camo. They have these assault rifles. They have trucks with their brand on them, with the cartel new generation brand on the side of these trucks, like full on military equipment. It's a paramilitary group now.
Yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them, because remember what I was saying about like the different political parties and stuff, and the federal police. I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of them are actually the army. Off-duty police.
I think as well. I think I was reading a book from Johan Grillo. Do you know Johan Grillo?
Yeah.
I had him on the podcast the other week, and so I was doing some research into his stuff, and he was. I've completely lost my track now. What was he saying? I've lost my track.
Military guys.
He was saying that now the new generation cartel have basically been getting ex-soldiers, ex-special forces, Israeli special forces from all over the world, American ex-CIA, and bringing them in and having basically training camps and training them to be soldiers.
Yeah, yeah, that sounds realistic. I haven't met any of those guys, kind of ex-military guys myself, but I've heard others talking about them. Also, a lot of the ex-special forces from Guatemala, especially, and Honduras, they also get kind of recruited into the Mexican groups.
Oh, yeah, I mean it's crazy down there. But I mean you must have met some, I mean I guess you, I mean just looking at some of the other places you've traveled in your book, you what you so am I right in thinking you interviewed the Yakuza over in Japan?
I didn't. I interviewed one Yakuza associate, but that was when I was in the Philippines already. But in Japan, I didn't so much interview them as like I met them. So one thing about the Yakuza you have to remember is they're not really like an illegal organization on their own, if that makes sense. It's more like a club you can join where everyone knows what really goes on, but the club itself isn't like considered a gang. They're considered like some kind of charitable organization or something, and you can even look them up on Google Maps. Like their offices, and look up their offices in the phone book. I mean, probably their offices now are closed because of coronavirus. Yeah. There's social distancing as well, but yeah, they're semi-official organizations, but there's in the last like 20 years or so, I think, there's been a lot of new laws, specifically like anti-gangster laws. Mm. So I think if they start showing their tattoos around in public, that can kind of count as intimidation. So like say if they walked into a shop just flashing their tattoos, like it could be a subtle sign that the shopkeeper needs to give them that like a 6-pack of beer for free or whatever. You know what I mean? But at sort of traditional Shinto, which is like the traditional Japanese religion, the traditional Japanese festivals, they're allowed to show off their tattoos because it's like it's like showing like traditional Japanese art, like dragons and demons and samurais and stuff like that. So when you have a good chance of seeing them like in real life. You go to Japan, you go to one of those festivals, they're just wandering around half naked. A lot of times they have like their own stalls and stuff. And yeah, they're pretty friendly to tourists. Like they're happy to just kind of pose for pictures and stuff. It's weird. It's weird.
Well, this is what I think is what is quite interesting because I have been to Japan and it's a very, very nice, it's a very sweet culture, and it's also, but I mean, knowing it, like just being around, you can tell. I would also imagine it's a very anti-drugs, anti-crime culture as well. So where do the Yakuza kind of fit into that?
That's a good question. They are like a very kind of, how should I say, conformist country. So I think like any kind of breaking the rules is generally looked down on. So even I remember it was like 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and I was about to cross the road, and I looked around both sides. I could see or hear no cars, and this road was at least like a half mile either way.
Yeah,
I could see in a straight line, no cars, and I just thought, I just crossed, and then like there was this Japanese couple standing there. And then they just kind of like looked at me like, what's this lunatic doing? I saw that like the light was still red.
Yeah, I mean that's just any form of dissent in it.
Yeah, but I mean like that doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means it's kind of more underground. And I think in a way that kind of almost makes it more seedy.
Yeah.
It's just because there's like so much kind of shame and stuff involved. I remember being in Italy, in Palermo, in Sicily, in like sort of this blatantly like mafia-controlled neighborhood. And there's this one street there that's basically like Amsterdam. They had all these coffee shops, but it's not legal in Italy to have these coffee shops. So like someone somewhere must have made a deal. And you just at one point like I remember a car of like the military police, the Carabinieri, rolled past. You could see everyone just like rolling up their doobies and shit and just smell of weed in the air. They didn't care at all. Like there, like even though it's something blatantly criminals going on, like it didn't feel as kind of sinister
Yeah.
as it would when you're kind of if you're trying to like score just like a 20 bag of weed in Tokyo.
Mm.
I think and there's even some research I think done in Europe. So Sweden would be like a very comparable country because Sweden's also got very strict drug laws. At least when it comes to the EU, it has I think one of the strictest drug laws. But it also has it has like a fairly low rate of drug use as well because like the Japanese, it's not really in their culture either. But
Yeah.
but their overdose rate that they have, it's much higher than somewhere like Portugal, where like they don't really care at all.
Yeah.
Where
Interesting.
everything's kind of out in the open in Portugal, and Portugal's overdose rate is like one of the lowest in Europe, even though they have more people using drugs, like doing coke, heroin, whatever, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Here in Sweden.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I guess it's really interesting. So this associate of the Yakuza you met, who was he?
He was he wasn't Japanese though, he was half Spanish, half Filipino.
Oh, okay, interesting.
And he had like a very child troublehood. So he was abused by his dad, the Spaniard, and like eventually him and his mum got away. But then he had a lot of issues with like his mum remarrying and stuff, and he was like always acting up a lot in school. And one time when he got into a fight in school, he actually ended up killing another boy. He didn't get too long because he was still a teenager at the time. It's like it's manslaughter rather than murder as well. But when he got out, he was like the Yakuza was kind of waiting for him, like we could use a guy like you. So I don't want to go into it too much right now, but like the abuse that he had as a kid, like if you look up a lot of like serial killers,
Mm,
like the biographies, a lot of serial killers, a lot of them were like abused when they were children, like either sexually or physically.
yeah, there's a
And
common
then
pattern.
Yeah, and then that kind of screws up their mind from an early age. So, kind of what happened with him in a different environment, he might have grown up to be a serial killer.
Yeah.
But they're like the Yakuza, they found a way to kind of commercialize it.
Mm,
To turn his hobby into a profession.
yeah. So what he was a hitman then?
Yeah, he was like a hitman and like a robber and enforcer.
Wow. Did he describe any of his hits or any of did he describe any examples of some jobs that he'd done? Was he operating in the Philippines or was he operating in Japan?
Both.
Oh wow, okay.
He had like a meth lab in the Philippines, I think, and like he had a partner had a meth lab in the Philippines, but he was also like robbing and killing drug dealers in Tokyo. He
Wow.
told me this one story, like him and his crew, they came across like a group of Iranian drug dealers, and they chopped them up into little pieces and threw them into Tokyo Bay. And
Jesus.
I remember as he was telling me the story, he was kind of doing the motions with his hands and stuff.
Oh God.
Yeah, it was like he had like the kind of mentality of a serial killer.
Just
Um,
just a separation from his acts, like just a complete
yeah,
separation from what he's done.
yeah, but like he wasn't like a complete psychopath because like
Yeah.
psychopaths don't have like any remorse, whereas he said that like yeah he's very troubled by that now and
Yeah.
he's trying to not live that lifestyle anymore.
Where did you meet him? How did you find him?
I don't want to say like give too much specifics
Yeah.
on it for legal reasons, but it was at a rehab center.
Okay. Oh, okay. Interesting. Wow, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you've been to so many places that like in researching this sort of stuff. I mean, one place I want to ask you is that in Iran that you were looking at stuff. What were you looking at? Opium and alcohol in Iran.
Yeah, opium and alcohol. Yeah. I also ended up smoking dope with the police on two separate occasions.
Really?
But
Well, I hear
I
Iranians
didn't
they
originally
love
know they were the police. Sorry.
I hear Iranians they love it over there. They love smoking weed and stuff. Well, it's hash over there, right?
Yeah, they are. I mean, Iranians are massive like around, at least around the other Middle Eastern countries,
Mm.
are massive wreckheads. Like we have this kind of impression, just because like a lot of the stuff they show on TV, it's like these crowds chanting like "Death to America," but it's really not like that at all. Like most, not a lot of the people I met, they were like religious, but they weren't like fanatics. You know, like they didn't really care that much.
Yeah, that's
And
just part of their life, isn't it? Like religion is part of their life. They're brought
yeah,
up. They're not orthodox. A lot of young people. Yeah, I mean, I traveled throughout the Middle East. I found it was quite common, like in Egypt, Jordan. Like the younger people especially have
yeah,
that kind of attitude.
yeah, yeah. And pretty much every other person, it's just because the kind of like personalities I attract, or maybe because they felt more comfortable around me as an outsider.
Hmm.
It seemed like everyone was like getting on it, and every other house I was offered either opium or illegal alcohol. It wouldn't be illegal for me because I'm not a Muslim, so non-Muslims are still allowed to drink, but it's definitely illegal for them.
But you can't buy it there, right?
Um, as like I would have to say I'm a agnostic, yeah, but like my mom is Christian, so I'll say I'm a
Yeah.
Christian. And
Yeah.
there's a big Armenian community in Iran. There's also a big Jewish community, surprisingly, but all the Jews in Iran are like super Orthodox Jews, so better off not asking the rabbi. Stick to the Christians. So yeah, it's a big Armenian Christian community. They have a lot of churches and stuff, and like their own local kind of community centers, and they'll usually like happily sell you some of their homemade wine or homemade vodka.
Is it good?
Um, yeah, the wine is all right. There's also a lot of smuggled stuff coming in. I think from like the Kurdistan area, like so like the Iraqi Kurdistan,
Yeah.
because there's a lot of Kurds in Iran too, so they just kind of buy it off their cousins across the border
Just
and
bring it
take
through.
it to the mountains. Yeah, that's so a lot of the beer and stuff comes from the Kurds. I remember literally on my second or third day, me and these other guys from the hostel just wandering around Tehran, and we found this one geezer in a pool hall. And like we asked, and he said like, yeah, just like let me play some pool. I'll be back in an hour. I can get you some booze, sure. So like we figured he was probably jerking us off, but you know we might as well come back in an hour anyway. And then he actually we came back in an hour, and he actually like drove up on a little moped. He just gave us a bag full of beer cans, and like we tried to pay him, and he was like, no, 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 no. And we tried like, hey, like maybe you want to share with us. He was like, no, 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 welcome to Iran. And he just drove off. Just gave
Really?
us this illegal beer for free.
Oh, nice.
Yeah,
Well,
it's
that's
just,
so nice. But
there's a lot of very generous people there in Iran.
I mean, I hear that as well. I'd love to go to Iran. It's one of the top countries I'd love to visit. It really, really does look cool. But you were saying so also about, I mean, the opium there. Did you say you got offered some? Did you try any? Like, what was it? What was it offered in? Like, what form did it come in?
Pipe.
A pipe. Yeah, yeah. Did it? I mean, yeah. Was loads of people around there smoking it?
Yeah, it's usually a social thing. So it's usually like you're sat around on the carpet and you have the thing in the middle where the ashes go, and
Mm-hmm.
it's usually like two or three people. If I'm honest, I wasn't that impressed.
Yeah.
I was like, maybe I did it wrong. Maybe I didn't smoke enough because I remember like my mate's dad, he was pretty much smoking it 24/7. So
Wow.
I guess he gets more out of it.
Yeah.
But I smoked some, and it just felt like hash. The same sort of like relaxy kind of mildly floaty feeling as hash. But in that case, you might as well just smoke some hash because it's cheap.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's not as addictive, and you can also drink alcohol afterwards. Like
Yeah.
after smoking up with his dad, we just went to the park. Or there was like a bunch of kids hanging out. Like one of them passed a bottle of moonshine to me. Drank about a third of it, and my friend was like, "Yeah, you might want to lay off that because you could die."
Really?
I was thinking like, "Yeah, I wish you told me that before I drank a bottle of your dodgy Iranian homemade vodka."
Yeah, wow, that's insane. Yeah, that's insane. I mean, well, what's other most like interesting countries you've been to? Where have you looked at more sort of like traditional natural drugs?
Ayahuasca. I did ayahuasca in the Amazon rainforest, which was definitely the weirdest night of my life. So El Chapo's little sushi party was the second weirdest, but this was the weirdest.
So what is ayahuasca?
So there's this chemical called DMT,
Hmm.
which is actually already in our brains. There's a theory. I don't know if it's been proved or not. There's a theory that that's where dreams come from. So when you're asleep and you see your dreams are just DMT like flooding your brain, but I'm not sure if that's actually.
It's released in your brain when you die, right? As well, DMT. When you die.
Yeah, apparently.
Yeah.
I don't know how much of that is just fact and how much of it someone just told me between like bong hits.
Yeah. Yeah,
But
no, I think that's where I mean, I know the drug as well, but like when I first heard of it, yeah, it was the chemical released by your brain when you die, and then that's what gives you like, the
it would make sense, so I believe that. I just don't
yeah,
know if it's fact, but I believe it myself.
yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I haven't actually looked it up either, so that I could just be chatting shit there as well. So yeah,
So what happens like because Joe Rogan goes on a lot about DMT, but what he does is he smokes it, whereas
yeah,
ayahuasca, and apparently I haven't smoked it myself, but apparently it's like a very intense experience. Like I have a friend who smoked it in Amsterdam, and she said that like she literally went to some other dimension for
yeah.
about
I've heard
200
that, like
years.
see aliens and stuff like that, all sorts of crazy shit. Yeah,
Yeah. But then like when she woke up, she was actually just it was just 20 minutes she was gone.
yeah, That's the weird thing as well. That's crazy.
So with ayahuasca it's a little bit different. It's a little bit different because you drink it, you don't smoke it. It's like a traditional um thing that like the shamans use in the traditional like Amazonian tribes to talk to the spirit world and get visions and stuff. And they've been doing it for hundreds of years, maybe even thousands of years. But it's different from DMT in that it has DMT in it, but it's more kind of drawn out. So DMT only lasts about 20 minutes, whereas this lasts about, I think the peak is about 4 hours, but overall I'd say about 6 hours.
That's a long time.
Yeah.
I can
Like
feel.
while you're coming down, it's like a little bit more gentle. So the peak is about 4 hours.
Okay, yeah.
But it's not. I didn't feel as intense as what I've heard about DMT because like I could still work out like okay, this is like the floor, this is the ceiling. Like I remember to like wipe my ass and wash my hands after going to the toilet because I remember I had the runs like halfway through.
Oh.
So like I understood when like someone else spoke to me, like it's like, are you feeling okay? Like I could say yes, no, I could. I was still like I still had like 1 foot in the real world, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But it's still 1 foot in the real world with anything DMT related is still very crazy shit.
Yeah, I get. Yeah, I know. Yeah, it's fucking. Yeah, it sounds mental stuff over there. But where were you when you were taking this? Were you in the rainforest? Rainforest.
Yeah, I was in the rainforest. We were about 2 hours from the nearest town, like boat. Apparently, that's the biggest town, the biggest urban center in the world that's not reachable by road. So
Oh,
you
wow.
take a boat there through the rivers, or you fly there.
Yeah.
I forgot what it's Iquitos, I think the city's called.
Hmm.
Yeah, so we're about 2 hours boat ride from Iquitos in a compound in a little village. Yeah, it felt authentic.
Yeah. It sounds. Oh man, yeah. That sounds wild. But I mean, where? I mean, we'll start to wrap it up because I'm sure you've got. I'm sure you're busy. But like, what? I mean, where else? What have you got? Any other interest? Like, what was the most interesting country you visited in researching your book? Like, where did you have the most fun as well?
Fun. I always have fun in Amsterdam.
Yeah.
I met. This didn't make it into the English version, but we have like a special Dutch edition
Mm.
for Holland and Belgium. and we met up Psycho through a friend of a friend. I met up Psycho Ecstasy Cook, who had the same name as me, Niko, except he was Dutch, but he also looked more Russian than me, which was weird. But he was a scary dude. Like, I would not like to mess around with him. He showed me around this, like, they weren't using it anymore, but like the site they used to make ecstasy is real, like, Breaking Bad shit. So in fact, actually, I think something like 80% of ecstasy around the world actually comes from the Netherlands.
Really?
So then it's not just like a country where you have loads of coffee shops and stuff. It's actually like a kind of a Colombia of Western Europe.
Really, the gang? What? It's that sort of violent, and it can get that violent, or
No, but more in terms of like where drugs come from, just in the world. It's just like
distribution.
It's not that violent, but in the last few years, there's been a war between like the Moroccan mafia, the Mokro mafia they call it, but that's mainly over cocaine, because it's also a major cocaine like import area.
Yeah.
Especially last year they found half of the cocaine that was intercepted that was on its way to Europe by sea, so like in shipping vessels and stuff, was going to Antwerp, which is in like the Dutch-speaking side of Belgium.
Belgium, yeah.
And so, like most of the coke, you can say like probably over half the coke in Europe comes through either Rotterdam or Antwerp, because they're the two biggest seaports in Europe. And then from there, because there's been such like the Moroccans got involved because they're originally bringing in hash for the coffee shops.
Yeah.
So they had all the connections at the ports and stuff to make the coke to branch into cocaine later on. But in the last few years, there's been a lot of crazy shit. Like there's this one guy who's on trial now. He murdered like witness's brother, and he murdered that witness's like lawyer. He was like a state witness against him. So he murdered the government's lawyer, basically. He had like a bazooka fired at one newspaper he didn't like.
Oh god!
He had like another sorry.
In the Netherlands, he shot a bazooka.
Yeah, in Amsterdam, yeah.
Fucking hell!
And like he had another guy drive a van into the office of another newspaper he didn't like and set the van on fire. Yeah, it was really not. I think he's facing like 7 or 8 different murder charges now.
Yeah. I mean, surely that's got to come under kind of maybe even terrorism there if you're using bazookas.
Yeah, well, it's the same thing that like Pablo Escobar did.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously Pablo Escobar did on a much bigger level. Like Netherlands is a very safe country, but like, you know, it can happen anywhere.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. I mean, I actually live in Brighton at the moment, and like there's still, I mean, apparently there's drug wars here all the time. Apparently, like it gets bad over here.
Yeah.
Drugs, what? So like, I guess my last thing I want to ask is, what's next for you?
Oh, so me and one of my cellmates are writing a book called How to Break Out of Prison.
Oh,
That's
cool.
the working title. And it's just kind of stores different jailbreaks, how different prisoners have done it. And if like whatever, like the Daily Mail accuses me of like providing a handbook to criminals, I'll just say, listen, guys, I've never actually broken out of prison myself. So this is all my deluded fantasy. So, who looks silly now?
Well, I mean, I guess unless it's, you know, literally telling you how to mine out of a prison or something. I'm sure you could get away with it. What is it just going to include, like great prison escape stories and stuff like that?
Yeah, and also like a sort of survival guide, like when you're in prison, just telling you what to expect and stuff if you ever do end up inside. That bit I can use my own experience for.
Yeah. Oh man, that sounds like a really, really cool book. How's that? Yeah, no, I mean, good luck.
I just don't want to get a real job, basically.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean. I'm just finishing up my master's in journalism, so I'm just trying to get onto this, doing the podcast, getting as many contacts as I can. I think your field is really, really interesting. I think crime in general, and I like the way that you approached it as well, really differently, looking at
crimes in different countries, Iran, Japan, these places that people don't look at. And I respect the fact that you're an adventurer as well.
Thank you.
No worries. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Niko, where can we find your book?
I think bookshops are closed now, but you can find them anywhere on the internet sells books, like Amazon, Waterstones, W.H. Smith.
Yeah. So yeah, no, definitely check it out. I'm getting into reading it now, and it's some really, really good stuff. So thank you again for coming on, man. I really, really appreciate it.
All right, cheers, boss. Have a good one.
Yeah, you too. Thank you, listeners. Check out the Instagram at RSP_podcast. Look out for the next one. Thank you. Cheers, man.